Hey, how are you? It's Judy McKenzie. I'm just getting my phone set up here. Sorry. How's your week been? Have you had any opportunity to work on any of the things that we've talked about? Oh, I always forget to do this. Hi, I'm Judy McKenzie. I am your mindset coach and the author of Women Rock the Business World and founder of Mindset Power Academy. This series of Facebook Live sessions has been about managing all your ant thoughts. And here's the support cat, right on time. He's always a little fashionably late. And, we've talked a lot about um, ways in which you can control it really is self-abusive chitter chat in your head that is quite negative. And throughout this whole process, I have been suggesting that you journal. And, I know for some people, journaling is second nature. And for others, it is not something that they've ever done, not something they've ever thought they wanted to do. But um, excuse me, I'm getting over a really rotten cold. Our whole house has been full of the flu so far, and some of us are not on the mend. I'm doing much better, but so I apologize for some, ums and slight coughs. Anyway, hi, Yvonne. Today we are going to talk about managing emotional triggers. Now, I have to tell you a funny story. I have a tendency to be a little bit of a Netflix addict. From time to time, I will get myself into a knitting frenzy because I love to make socks, but I can't do it unless I'm watching TV. So I found a really fun Australian show that had 5 series, which is my favorite because you can't really binge on one season, can you? Anyway, I this is a 5 season and it's called Offspring, and it is not I'm not here to tell you about my favorite TV shows, but talk about emotional triggers. The main character is a young female obstetrician, and she has the craziest conversations in her head, and she appears neurotic as crazy, and controlling and all of those kinds of things. But her triggers, I was watching it last night as I was finishing up a sock, and I thought how ironic, because I'd done some research earlier in the week last week about what I want to talk about this week, and it was about triggers, and of course she's just triggering all over the place. So it got me into, and it's a comedy. There's some very serious parts to it, but it is, boy, if you ever want to see somebody really you know go wild with themselves in terms of ants and triggers and everything else, um, that's a show to watch. So anyway, let's talk about emotional triggers that, I know given the last month and the activities, there's just a bazillion emotional triggers that are flying all over the place. You can't go to YouTube or Instagram or Twitter, anywhere, without experiencing people's triggers that are just, they are just going off like atomic bombs everywhere. Hi, Elaine. Anyway, and also with Christmas coming up, there's an awful lot of opportunity for triggers to be um, kicked open. So I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of triggers and just some very quick strategies that, there's a number of strategies that I use in my coaching program, but there are some basic ones that I think is helpful to everybody. So triggers, they can be a response to all 5 senses. You probably don't think about it that much because actually, most most of us think about triggers as people or events, but sometimes, so, and auditory. So let me tell you about when I was a kid, I had, and I still have it actually, um, fairly hefty motion sickness. And my father was a pipe smoker. Back in the 50s, they thought smoking a pipe in a closed car with a kid who gets car sick was okay. And so for the longest time, when I would um, smell, uh, pipe tobacco, I would feel car sick. Now, let me layer that with another thing. So not only did my father smoke a pipe, and but they listened to some of the twangiest country and western music ever. So I have a double trigger, one to pipe tobacco and the other to certain crazy country and western. I could feel nauseous. Crazy, isn't it? um, and also, at Christmas time every year, I create the cinnamon sticks and all the orange peels and allspice and all those kinds of things. Throw them in a pot, put them in water, and then um, just put it on low. And I remember one time my goddaughter, who we have always been very close, and we've always spent a lot of time when she was younger at my house during the Christmas season. And she said every time she smells those smells, she thinks of me, and she thinks of those parties that we used to have around Christmas. And so that triggers a really nice happy memory for her, which you can't, as a godmother, you can't get a much more powerful um, feedback as that something that you do triggers a wonderful feeling. So there's all these wonderful things, and then there's some of the negative things. Um, Another trigger for me, and is a number of years ago, I was betrayed professionally, and I had never been betrayed professionally before, and I really hadn't expected it. But what I'm reminded of is that the person who was betraying me and was doing a very good job, because I was oblivious to it, kept saying how transparent she was being. And so now, when people use the term transparent, that's a bit of a trigger for me. So I have to be very, very mindful. So think about, what are some of the triggers? I'd be very happy if you could type in, what are some of the triggers that you have? We all have triggers that we're not aware of. We all have triggers that we are aware of. So there are triggers of, people who are, who let's say, people who love to be victims. Those people can be triggers. There are people in the workplace that have a tendency to talk in a very arrogant manner, and they will trigger people as well. There are passive aggressive people who trigger people. There are events that trigger. Um, there and often, when you have had a loss and there is a birthday or a death date or an anniversary, those are triggers as well. They trigger experiences, and they trigger emotions, and um, they trigger all kinds of things that sometimes we'd rather have them, under the covers. We don't, and sometimes we're actually triggered and we don't know what's happened. That all of a sudden you feel, like a jealousy, or you feel a real knot in the gut of your stomach. Something's wrong. Or you get this feeling that, oh yeah, Elaine says certain music can trigger memories for absolutely. I had a whole night of going through all my breakup music one night this summer, just for fun, because YouTube, you can, it wasn't that I was looking to be sad or anything, but it was, what was I putting myself through listening to this music? So you're absolutely right, Elaine. I think music is one of the biggest triggers. Um, and it can be really positive or it can be really negative. Um, but everybody has breakup music, and that's why everybody also has wedding music and things like that. But back to events in terms of um, where certain dates or certain months, uh, certain things that you're not always fully conscious of. They sometimes sort of catch you up, and you're not aware of it. So also, when we're talking about triggers, triggers can actually they can be active, that we are grown adults, but they may be actually from our childhood. And you're going to hear this coming up fairly soon, where you get people who love Christmas and people who hate Christmas. And you can get a pretty good idea that some of the folks who hate Christmas, it hasn't always been the most happiest of times, that it has been painful for them in a number of ways. And and it's not that they're not generous and giving and all those kinds of things. There's just a lot of triggers that are there. Um, the other, so it's each of these triggers tells us a whole ton about ourselves, probably more than we ever wanted to know. But it's worth a thought. To get back to this journaling business, that I don't mean to be too pushy around journaling, but journaling is such a great way to get to articulate the kinds of things that uh, you you want to think about, but you don't maybe want to think about them that very moment, but you can get them down. You can write them down. Don't read it after. Just stream of consciousness, write everything down. And we're going to talk about that as I talk about some of the few steps that you can take when when you find that you are reacting strongly to something. You've been triggered and you don't know what it is. So let me just. We also know that was my little scoot over and look at the notes thing. We also know that triggers. Some people trigger all over the place, and you may or may not know of people who do that. But I certainly, that's the business I'm in. That a large part of my coaching practice is people who have triggers that find it very difficult to understand why they're experiencing the emotions they are. So you can feel anger, you can feel stress, you can feel deep sadness, you can feel rage. Um, do you know anyone who has, like, I think road rage is probably a whole series of triggers, wouldn't you think? That one of my things that I'm very mindful of is I am a really diligent blender in of traffic. Coming from Vancouver, there were so many bridges and everything else, you needed to learn how to merge really, really well. And if somebody was not playing by the rules and not merging properly, I would hear myself having a little like, giving them a little advice about merging. I'm not a horn person, um, but I think in the wrong hands, that could be a real nasty trigger for somebody. Um, can you think of anyone in your life that has a trigger that you actually know about, and maybe they know about, and they choose not to deal with it, and you would really love to be able to help them put that to rest? Because you lose control when you don't understand your triggers. You know what I mean? Like, you can't control other people, and you can't control some of the circumstances that are around you. We just can't. Hi, Gina. Um, but what you can do is you can control how you react to these situations. And triggers are one of those kinds of things that um, is why they are such a challenging event, because they absolutely demand if you want to impact them, they demand that you look at what part of you is being threatened. So you know, one of the triggers that I get when I'm working with my corporate clients quite often is people who have feel like they've lost control of their life or their work life because other people are taking credit for their thoughts. Um, and that leaves them feeling like they can't share any of their ideas out loud. They're very suspicious. They're suspicious of the workplace. They start to feel paranoid. And really, what it is that there are many ways to show competency in the workplace, but this particular trigger, whether real or not, sometimes they're not. They're fears, and you suspect that this is what's happening. Remember, we talked about your ability to read people's minds and do stuff like that. That's all part of this. That it can really impact the relationships. It can impact the the advancement of your career. And it just impacts your overall happiness. And we know, back to the very first time we got on Facebook Live was, the amount of negative thoughts you have and the cortisol that you run through your system, and all the other damaging chemicals that you release because your body thinks you're in trouble, where in fact it's a mental interpretation and most of the time not accurate. So with that, this is kind of the culmination of that whole manage your thinking, and I'd love to talk with you more about it, and and I do have a coaching practice, so but this is not the purpose of this. It's to share information. So when you find yourself in a situation where you are experiencing a trigger of some sort, and we'll call it that because your guts just turned into a knot, you're feeling anxious all of a sudden, um, sometimes you'll even feel lightheaded. There's a lot of different signs to let you know that you are experiencing a trigger, is to tell yourself, okay, I'm likely triggering right now. Just identify it. Identify what's happening. And then step back. And if you're driving, don't step back into the back seat, but just step back a minute and think, whoa, what did I just see or hear, or what just happened here? Like something just happened. Just detach yourself from the emotion that you're feeling at that particular moment, because that's a fabricated emotion that's attempting to protect you from something that may or may not be true. We know that a very large part of the things we think are not true. So you relax, step back a moment, breathe while you're doing that. Then, I'm gonna use a word here that sounds a little flaky, and maybe that's just one of my triggers, but I really want you to kind of center yourself. Feel your feet wherever they are. If they're on the gas pedal, if you're walking, if you're sitting, feel your body, center it. Get yourself, breathe deep, recognize you're having a trigger reaction, and, like, relax your body. And that's where the work comes in, is being able to do that. And then I want you to focus in on what kind of person do you want to be right now? How do you want to be seen right now? Do you want to be seen as someone who flies off the handle and goes all crazy? Or do you want to be seen as someone who is thoughtful about a process, will think it through, and then speak speak thoughtfully rather than speaking emotionally. Um, and then I want you to journal the experience as soon as you can. Because the more you understand the things that trigger you, the more control you get over your life, you get over your emotions, you get over um, putting your wrong foot forward. That we've all done that. We've all had triggers where, we've stomped out or we've done something that was like, oh, shoot, I wished I hadn't done that. Anyway, triggers are huge. We all have them. It doesn't matter how hard you work on them. There's always other little triggers come up. So what I would like you to do now is to, or when you have a moment, is to put a list of the triggers that you know that make you feel insecure, make you feel disrespected, make you feel um, unloved, make you feel unneeded, make you feel untrustworthy, any of those kinds of things. Write down all the times and go back into your history. And I had to go back into my history with that word transparent because it's not something that, I don't, my heart doesn't go when I read it because it's still, fortunately, it's not as big of a word as it was at one point. It's kind of like communication. It's like, oh, remember when what was the Stephen Covey thing that everybody was talking about? And it was one of those, a paradigm shift. Remember those hot words that after a while become buzzwords that you just kind of want to get people to stop saying those things? Think about your triggers that you know about. Think about times where, and you're going to come up with a list, and but make sure also you think about, as Elaine said about the music, think about positive triggers too. Um, but positive triggers are usually not a problem. They're just lovely. You just go off in a little daydream land. The negative triggers are they're the ones that will keep you up at night. So start out, do 5 at a time, then maybe do 5 another time, then maybe do 3, because the low hanging fruit are the first 10, right? And we'll go from there. So I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next Monday, but I will let you know. And if you have any ideas, love to hear from you about that. I hope that you have found it. Gina's asking, are the triggers easy to identify? I think Gina, because you came in a little bit late, that when you go through the video, uh, we've talked a little bit about how to identify some of those kinds of things. And by all means, just send me a note if you remain to be unclear. But they generally are, the low-hanging fruit are easy to identify. Then it gets a little trickier. And, we can chat about that. But if there's anything that you would like to talk about for any of you, and I thank those who are able to be live tonight. Hi, Saul. And then, there are an awful lot of people who just aren't available. What's interesting is that I get more people live when I'm doing my night owl thing at 10 o'clock. So I think I'm not the only night owl on this planet. But I've been trying to behave myself and not stay up most of the night. So, anyway, I wish you a wonderful, wonderful week. This weekend I'm going to a workshop to write a book in a weekend. How fun will that be? So God knows, I'll keep you posted on that. But I will chat with you next Monday at 8 o'clock. So watch out for those triggers, and we'll keep your pen and paper handy. Talk to you soon. Bye. The rat says bye. Bye bye.